Alrighty, we'll just go ahead and jump into the new material. So this is about don't know mind. Um, so a little preamble before we jump into it. So first off, concepts are great and unbelievably useful. Thoughts are great. Loosely held opinions are great. And emotions are good and healthy. We're not trying to get rid of any of that stuff in the practice. Um, Moreover, to get rid of any of that stuff would be dissociation, repression, denial. We don't want that. What we want to do in the practice is learn to hold our own views lightly. If they are held lightly, then they can be used in a nimble way. If we are identified with them, that's where the trouble is. So what we let go of is fixed view. We let go of belief. And we've already talked a little bit about this in the class so far, or in the course series. You know, that one devotion class was titled uh, Devotion Without Belief. So fixed views hem us in. But why do they hem us in? All fixed views and reactive habit patterns are what helped us make it through childhood. These help us distract ourselves from suffering that we could not have metabolized at the time. However, we're not children anymore, and the aim is to drop these. However, understand that to do this is to make yourself vulnerable. But I think if it's done in a measured way and there's support, I think it's worth it. So that's much of what Don't Know Mind is getting at. And also, let me just quickly read a quote from Ken MacLeod, who I think very highly of. So from this podcast or series from him, Awakening from Belief, he says, the practice of Buddhism is about exposing and dismantling belief. So actually, why don't we just contemplate that for a moment? Okay, good. All right, so what is Don't Know Mind? Don't Know Mind is the suspension of the need to know. It's this, the skill of Don't Know Mind is to be at ease and equanimous with the usually quite disturbing condition of confusion. Also, it is the loosening up in the face of delusionally held beliefs. I'll reiterate that. It's also the loosening up of delusionally firmly held on to beliefs. That loosening up leads, but this is interesting, but then when we loosen up on our beliefs, that actually brings about more confusion, right? Because whenever we have an ossified belief, like I know what's right, blah, 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 like there's a kind of knowing there. It's a kind of ignorant and arrogant knowing, but it's a kind of knowing. So but you know, you can see how it kind of works. It does give you a sense of knowing and orientation. And so what we do in the practice is we let loose of what we know, and that causes even more confusion. What lets confusion change and transmute is to keep holding the stance of don't know, just don't know. This is important so that it doesn't all just recoagulate into fixed views. And this is a skill set, and it's learned over time in the practice. So here I want to highlight the word suspend. So the need to know is suspended when we practice. This description feels right to me. With the need to know mind, there is a darting and grasping. With don't know mind, there's a feeling of suspension, of just hanging out in open, spacious awareness, and of reactive patterns, and the reactive pattern of needing to know just simply kind of pauses and is a bit more unmanifest and suspended. Don't know mind is the fruit of the practice. It has a strong equanimity component. It is full surrender and acceptance of not knowing. It is the mind at home with confusion. And this is a centrally important life skill, incidentally. The reality is that we don't know much. In some ways, we're just fumbling through life. I think Shinzen Young says somewhere something along the lines of how anything that is known creates more unknowns. So what's known grows, but then the unknown kind of grows geometrically, right? Anyway. Okay, so why? This is all good and well, but I'd expect that there'd be some benefit here. So let's discuss some more about the benefits of why we want to develop this don't know mind. So it's all about learning to be equanimous with things as they are, to not need to be on one side or another of an issue. We develop a more open mind that has let go of harsh judgments. The ordinary mind needs to avoid confused and muddled states. And so we're kind of going beyond that here. Moreover, this is a more sane way of relating to the world and our thoughts. We just allow and understand that we don't know how things should be or how things will turn out. The normal mode of being is one in which we imagine we are separate actors apart from the rest of the world, which judges, condemns, condones, and predicts. Don't know mind is where we allow this conceptual fantasy world to collapse and that we become simply part of suchness, or just of the way that things are. So we see the qualities of openness, of the quality of openness is important. Don't know mind is the mind of openness. In this way, it's part and parcel of beginner's mind, right? And maybe you guys have heard of, there's a very famous book by Shunryo Suzuki Roshi, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. So beginner's mind is the fresh mind that is open to seeing things a new way, outside of old, sclerotic, well-worn paths laid out before. Don't know mind allows for sufficient space around thought, such to allow for seeing the yet to fore unseen solution. Don't know mind helps with exploration and self-development. Much of the time, we don't know what's coming next. This openness of don't know mind helps you step into the mystery, because actually every step is unknown, right? And to bring about self-development, we need to explore, and we need to have that humility of like, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but it'll be okay. Okay, great. So there are, of course, things to watch out for with this, let's say, teaching or frame of reference. Okay, so equanimity, indifference, dissociation, even resignation are all similar, but with important differences that set them apart. I should say that equanimity is not indifference or callousness. It's also not resignation. So we're not trying to become doormats or not care. Like, it's good to be engaged, and it's good to work for what's right as far as you can tell, but then we also need to have some humility around it and not kind of believe our own stories in this like kind of fixed clinging way. So equanimity is the skill of not suffering needlessly by fighting with the way that things actually are. Equanimity is being at peace. An internal experience of peace and diminished suffering is the optimal place from which to take action, militating against resignation. Similarly, optimal equanimity is imbued with concern, not indifference. So we don't excuse inaction or indifference with don't know mind. We are engaged with our lives, but just not suffering any more than needed. Okay, so we'll get into, I'll talk more about how to actually do a meditation method that'll facilitate don't know mind. But are there any questions that are coming up right now? Okay. Here's a comment. Like as soon as you learn about something, you start to understand how much you don't know, whereas you didn't know how much you didn't know before you started knowing. Right? Exactly. Right? Yeah. Exactly. Every bit of information exposes more don't know. Yeah. 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 Okay. Cool. All right. One more shot. Anything coming up for people?
I guess I have the question is kind of coming up for me. It's related to current events.
Sure.
I guess is like how what does equanimity feel like in a moment of like moral outrage, right? Like where you're
Yeah.
feeling like you have to act or you're yeah. That's my
Yeah.
question.
I think mainly I don't know, honestly. And I think it's also like a personal thing. And I think there's lots of different layers to this, and I can just speak to some of how I think I view it. So it's like, first off, I think you need to ask yourself, are you suffering? Are you suffering? And if you're suffering, your view on things is going to be distorted, right? Like stress screws up your ability to think straight. So I think that that's just one, I think, helpful reflection. Um, and then I think that, like, we have opinions and we have assessments of things, and that's fine. But then I also think it's important to like, yeah, okay. And I don't know if this is directly related, but this is just what's coming up for me. It's like, I think it's important to try to understand different perspectives and not fall into like the quick and easy kind of like made for TV version. You know what I'm saying? Because anyway, and then I think a lot of it has to do with, well, I think first watching the process of identification, right? We identify with our thoughts, and when we're identifying with our thoughts, it's not total crap necessarily, but we should be a little bit suspicious. And then there was another thought, which is, I don't know. And then something else that comes up for me is like, oh, geez, all of it, like, like everything is like, mediated by the senses. I mean, we don't know. All we have is our sensory experience. And so for me, that tempers everything. Like a really passionate stance, in my mind, should be tempered by the fact that everything is just like in a certain way, everything just a sensory event, and I don't know what it is beyond that. So there's this profound recognition of my own ignorance and inability to assess. But then that's just one view, and then you have to keep assessing and engage with ethics and even put your position out there or even possibly take action. So I think it's a big mess, like everything, honestly. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Like, yeah, if anybody thinks that there's like some sort of clear answer, you know that's wrong. Okay, cool. We'll go on with the lecture. So, okay, how are we going to do this practice? And then to be clear, before we launch into the practice, we'll take like a 5-minute break, bathroom break and stuff. So we'll kind of do this as like almost like a little bit of a pre-meditation. So just go ahead and sit up straight, push the crown of the head up towards the ceiling. So we're going to sit in friendly awareness and inquire into our thoughts. So now, okay, we're here. We're sitting in this open, friendly awareness. And now go ahead and bring up a triggering thought. And now ask yourself, is that true? Can I really know that's true? And then you kind of watch the thought dissolve. And then go ahead and trigger yourself again. Think of something that, is triggering. And then ask yourself, can I really know that's true? And also see if you can peer into how this is also sense data, just sensory input. Like, a thought is a sensory experience. Just like you can see your thoughts and hear your thoughts, just like you can hear external auditory events or external visual events. So go ahead and trigger yourself again. So can I know that this is true? And also I'll say here, we're not trying to make our view wrong. What we're trying to do is add just simply a spaciousness. It's like we're trying to find the 0 point between extremes of, oh, nothing exists, nothing matters, and everything exists permanently and everything is of tremendous importance and we're taking it all super serious. So what we're doing in this practice is finding the 0 point. There's like room for the form, and there's also room for the formless. And now bring up a thought that invokes aversion or craving. It's something that you want or something that you want to get rid of. And then say to yourself, things should be different. Because that's what that thought and that desire, etc., that's its position. That's its ontological position about reality. Things should be different. So think of something that maybe you don't want or want desperately that you don't have. Things should be different. And let's stay with this for another minute. So keep bringing up things that trigger you. Things should be different. Obviously, right? And then let's actually inquire into that thought. What does things should be different even mean? And let's try it again. So things should be different. What does that mean? What could that mean? And, it's okay to let things feel true or even be true in a kind of relative and tentative sense. But we want to see how at a higher level of scrutiny, it all just falls apart. Um, so I'll just reiterate what we're going to be doing. So in a sense, we're just building on last week, just sitting in open awareness, but open, friendly awareness, but we can take two approaches. Either we can trigger ourselves and let thoughts arise, or we can just sit in open awareness and then thoughts either arise or they don't. Either is fine. And then when they do arise, there's kind of two different inquiries we can use. One is, can I really know this is true? Do I know this is true? And then let me just say, we're not trying to de-reify our reality. There's a way that our reality is just as it is, and it's fine. But then we're just like taking the edge off this like harsh knowing. So that's one. And then two is really looking at desire and aversion, and just being clear on what we're experiencing. We're experiencing the thought and the desire that things should be different, which is on some level pretty crazy. So we're just looking at that. That's basically it. So, okay, how's that going? Any questions coming up?
I have a question again. Sorry to
Sure.
dominate the
No problem.
conversation a little bit. I guess kind of going back to the question I asked earlier, it's like what's coming up, and I don't, expect that we'll have an answer. It's not even, or that anybody does. But like, if there's no such thing as should, because there's not really, right? I mean, that's what I keep kind of coming back to when I ask that question is, so then where does catalyst for change come from?
Well, I don't know. I guess I don't know, firstly. And then I think that what comes up for me is that I think it's really subtle. And, we're not saying that there are no shoulds. Like, it's just that like the only thing that's being said is if there's a should, we just see the should arising in mind as such. Like, oh, this is me having a should. And maybe you can share a should with somebody else, right? And there's a kind of like tentative and proximate reality to that. But where is it now? Like, where is it now? It's all mystery. Who the hell knows? And so the point is, and see, this is where like all these like, there's a lot of, I think, basically what comes up is like phoniness, especially in like the whole Advaita Vedanta community, even some in Zen about like, oh, they're like, oh, all this stuff is not real. Well, it is real on some level, but on some other level, it's not. And so the principal way that I think about all this stuff is things are real enough to where you can function. They're just not real enough to justify suffering over. Like, how, like, this, like, think of it. Oh, this is a good inquiry. Think of all the stories that really bring about suffering. And none of those stories are like, oh, yeah, maybe I'm right about that. Whatever. It's cool. No, you're like, oh, this is right. There's like this harsh, like, I know. And we're not even trying to get rid of that. We're just looking. And so it's like way gentler. It's way gentler than a lot of times we might think. It's like, oh, here's a should. Here's me having a desire. And in a sense, there's not a problem with desire. There's a problem with like kind of this harsh craving. So it just is like this, like, it's like real close, but I think I don't know. Did that speak to your question at all?
Yeah, it did. Thanks. Yeah, and that makes sense.
And then also, I would add this one thing. I mean, there's all these different positions taken in, like, the kind of spiritual world, and I'm not big on drawing really clear political conclusions, for example, from spiritual practice. What I think spiritual practice does is it informs your your intention, and it makes it such that you look after your intention and try to develop wholesome intention. And then what actions are, we don't know. It's totally indeterminate. It's not totally indeterminate, but it's pretty indeterminate.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the other thing I guess that kind of came up too is realizing like that really like being open and and not holding strong views, like really the ultimate should, I guess, is everybody should be this way more. I mean, that would be ideal. So, I guess where change is within my control is to continue to try to be that person.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, it's kind of a little trite, but be the change that you want to see in the world. So like, so I tend to be more in favor of like being kind to the person that's right next to you is generally a very safe thing. If what your thing that you're after like involves like raging and getting pissed about stuff and trying to make a bunch of really complicated things happen, then I'm not saying that's wrong, but it just is really complicated, and it's not as like sure a thing as just like being nice to the person in front of you.
Yeah.
Because that's like it's just more blameless. And I don't know, but to be clear, I think there are diverse views on this. So anyway, these are just my personal positions. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. All right. Anything else coming up for people?
Yep, I do. So last week we talked about accepting and acceptance and how being accepted and accepting others. I mean, we always like being around people that accept you. Sure. That struck me really hard or strong. And I think it even ties in here because when we accept things as they are, then it leaves that judgment and that just what you said, that harshness. So I find myself trying to catch myself in that judgment, which is that aversion. Yep. And the shoulding, right? But that doesn't mean that I'm happy with the things that I've come across when I'm doing that, but that I've accepted, okay, well, that's how it is. And then when you're in that peaceful state of acceptance, then you can maybe think about, what can I do? What can I do then? Because you're in a state of peacefulness about it. Yeah. You're not going to make a rash judgment. Yeah. You're coming from a place of calm and acceptance.
Right.
I don't know. I try.
Well, I think it goes to that whole second arrow illusion, that's talked about in Buddhism. It's like, and I think I might be mixing analogies, but like there's one parable where the guy gets shot by an arrow, and then the guy comes to like take the arrow out, and he's like, no, who's the guy that did this? What was his caste? What was his profession? Why did he do it? And then the guy's like, shut up, let me just get the arrow out. And so it's a little bit like that. It's like, it's like things are plenty difficult without your, whatever, you're making it harder. So it's like, what we're trying to do is like kind of generate this quality of gentleness around thought, and like seeing the soft contours around the thoughts, so that you don't have to like make it any harder than it has to be.
Yeah, you said it better than I did. Thank you. That's good.
Okay, anything else coming up for people?